Hello and welcome to Trust and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemel, and we're here every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I did have a guest scheduled for today, and unfortunately, we've been having technical difficulties for the last 15, 20 minutes. We haven't been able to get a stable connection. So we'll reschedule Paul for another day. But in the meantime, I thought I would jump on here, and I had a topic kind of in the back of my mind to talk to you about, that based on a meeting I had with a client yesterday. So. Um, um, I've been working on this one particular matter for a few months now, and I'm fortunate to be working with some really terrific people. Um, Two of them I've known for literally decades, and another is a probate attorney here in the Los Angeles area who is just absolutely top notch. A fellow by the name of Leo Drubach. And one of the things that I was talking to one of my colleagues yesterday after the meeting with the client, and one of the things that he observed is we've gotten a tremendous amount done in the 4 months or so that we've been working on this, and he attributes it largely to the fact that we're all very focused on serving the client, as opposed to staking out our piece of territory, and showing that we're the strongest dog in the pack. He didn't exactly use those words, but I don't use the kind of language he used. So and I thought that was an interesting observation. Um, as you probably know, on Tuesdays I do a show called Business Lessons from the Military, and most recently, my professional time was spent in the Navy, and the military in general, all the branches of the military, really put a very high premium on teamwork. And um, I mean, obviously, there's a good reason for that. War fighting is not a what do they call it, a solo sport. It whether you're fighting a ship, whether you're fighting in a platoon or a company, whatever that is, in some sort of expeditionary force, there are a lot of people involved, a lot of logistics involved, and it all has to coordinate well in order to meet your objective. And one would imagine that this translates naturally in the civilian world, but in my colleague's experience, it does not. And he was telling me that the sort of camaraderie and smooth working of all the different people is rather an anomaly in his experience, and that's really a shame. So one of the I guess sort of lessons that I've learned through this, and I will say, by the way, that in general, throughout my career, when I was in the real estate business prior to the Navy, and now in this, as you've heard me joke before, Kevin 3.0 phase of my life, um, I've always put a big premium on teamwork, on the working together of various people in order to make things go as smoothly as possible, serve clients as well as possible. And that may seem to be obvious, but evidently not. And so, one of the things to which I attribute this in this current situation is we've really avoided letting our egos get overly involved in what we're doing. So we all basically know our role, but we also respect the knowledge and experience of the other people involved. And in so doing, we can listen to their ideas, their criticisms, and take them on board and figure out the best path forward. So whether you're working on your own estate plan, or whether you're someone who helps people planning and administrating their estates, I would encourage you to think about, how do you build teamwork among the various members? First of all, who is the captain of the team? So when we started out this process, excuse me here for just a moment. This is the problem with having post-nasal drip. When we first started out on this project, I was not the team captain. I was not the first guy in. It was actually one of the lawyers who's involved, and he's a business lawyer. He brought in a probate and estate planning attorney, and then he brought me in. Oh, look, we have Paul here. Let's see if we can get him in here now.
So,
Hi, Paul.
hi, I'm so sorry about the internet there.
Yeah, well, good. So I actually we're already live here, so this will work out fine. So thanks for coming on the show today. And I first of all, I know as a lawyer, you often get caught up in court, and that's always a challenge, because you can't say to the judge, pardon me, but I have to go. Right. So oftentimes your time is not your own. But so let me take just a moment here and introduce you. This is my guest, who has overcome the technical difficulties I was mentioning a couple of minutes ago. This is Paul Deloughery.
Yes.
Yeah, and Paul is a trust and estate attorney, and you practice in Arizona. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and your office is in Scottsdale, as I believe, which is a lovely part of Arizona. As a kid, I lived in Phoenix, and a few years ago, coming back from the Southeast, I stayed at the Valley Ho Hotel in Scottsdale. It's terrific. So you probably know.
I know where it is. Yeah, historic hotel.
Yeah. So before we get into your subject, which is debunking the 5 myths of probate, share with us just a little bit about your background. How did you decide to get involved in? How did you decide to become a lawyer? How did you decide to get involved, in this area of the law?
Well, okay. So I have a master's degree in music performance, saxophone, bassoon. I actually played the bagpipes, and I found it difficult to make a good living in that. So in my early 20s, I searched elsewhere, and I had a number of friends who were lawyers, and they all seemed really interesting and had interesting stories, and so I thought that must be a great lifestyle. They should have warned me about the long hours and how yes, you can have interesting stories, but it's actually not an easy way to make money. But anyway, no, so I ended up going to law school, and I thought I was actually going to go into healthcare, but I for whatever reason, I think we humans are drawn in certain directions, and so I was just drawn to it. I have maybe different theories about how I got into this area, but maybe it's a way. Maybe it's a way to work through some of my own background and my own issues or something like that. Because there's no there's no nicey way to practice probate law, or at least the stuff that I do, because it's you're dealing with multiple family members and greed, jealousy, and resentment, usually from childhood, that rears its ugly head after a loved one has passed away. And so it's like five-dimensional chess. You know, we're dealing with the law. We're dealing with multiple areas of the law,
Hmm.
tort law, probate law, and then civil rules and probate rules, and then add to that the psychology of multiple people, and you know what's going on, and then trying to guess what the intent of a deceased person is. So it's challenging.
Yeah. So how long have you been practicing, in the probate and estate arena?
Yeah. Well, so I'll say since 2004,
Oh,
I've really been doing only trust and estates issues, and I was focusing more on the planning part for a while, and then I just, there was something that was nagging at me that I thought that I needed to get into actual litigation, because the doing the planning work, it's all theory, and you know, like, you know, we can put all these trusts together and plan to have co-personal representatives or co-trustees, and oh, you know, think, oh well, that should work, you know, what could go wrong with that? um,
right.
and it, and so it's taken me getting beaten up over the years in different cases to I guess see how things actually work. So and yeah, so I mean, even from a spiritual standpoint, I mean, I think I think there's a difference between knowing the theory of something and then like really like understanding something on an inner basis to be able to help people more. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, so how did you? So, I'll take a step back for a moment. Um, when I saw your topic, the five myths of probate debunked, it reminded me of when I first got out of the Navy. I was working with service members and such who were transitioning to civilian life, helping them find jobs primarily. And out of that experience, I wrote a book called The Eight Deadly Sins of Job Hunting for Veterans, right? And because I saw time and again, the military people who were not being successful transitioning, they were doing the same thing, right, over and
hmm
over again, and essentially shooting themselves in the foot, right?
mm,
And so it caught my attention, this idea of the five myths of probate debunked. So I suspect these are things that people commonly think about how probate works that are not true at all. And so I was very curious. That's why I'm so glad that you're able to come on the show to talk about this. So how did you, first of all, how did you develop this idea of the five probate myths? Where did those come from?
well, well, it came from thinking that it would be easier to digest than the 60 myths. So so um, yeah, these are certainly five common ones, and I can kind of go through them if you want a little bit, but
Yeah.
these are by no means the only five. And I think what happens is people hear something, and uh, you know, life is complicated, and so we humans have to simplify things, otherwise our heads would explode. So we you know we learn one thing that kind of creates our paradigm, and then we uh, you know we try to make decisions based on that. So
Mhm.
for example, the first two myths that I wrote about, one is that if you have a will, then you have to go to probate. and the other one is the flip side, that if you have a will, then you don't have to go to probate. So, so and it, so the way it really works out is if you have it, so it's more complicated.
Mhm.
And just without going into all the details with it, the the um, the punchline to all of this is unless you're well, no, I'll skip the unless part. The punchline is talk to a lawyer. It really talk to a lawyer, just to make sure. I was going to say if you're absolutely sure that you don't need to do a probate, but no, I get people who are absolutely sure all the time, and they're they can be wrong. But um, so so the thing with probate, well, and I'm sure you talk about this stuff on your show probably a lot, but so there's a difference between probate assets and non-probate assets, and probate assets are ones that are in the deceased person's name alone, and where they have to actually go through the probate process. Um, and so if you do have a will, then that's relevant for those. But then there's a lot of non-probate assets uh, where like retirement accounts or things in a trust. Um, and uh, and I'm sorry, by the way, for being late this morning. I had a hearing that was kind of keeping me, and actually this hearing, well, I won't go into the confidential details, but the hearing was interesting because there is a trust, but there's also a probate asset,
Mhm.
uh, and then the trust has what's called power of appointment that gives the surviving trustee the ability to transfer uh, assets uh, uh, through a will, like to say in the will who gets it.
Mm.
And then there's a dispute among the family about whether that was proper and whether the trust was funded. So, so sometimes things, even if you have a trust, sometimes the whole thing can get wrapped up through probate court. So I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I handled a case a few years ago where they had, the married couple had set up a trust and
Yeah.
duly transferred all their assets into the trust, except,
Oh
there
yeah.
were, they left one out, right? And then, like you said, there was a retirement account,
Yeah.
and it should have transferred to the surviving spouse,
Okay.
but the bank kept messing up the paperwork, and they kept
Oh
messing up
yeah.
the paperwork, and after a year of messing up the paperwork, the other spouse died. And
Mm.
so now we ended up having to file a probate in order to deal with, that retirement account, because the bank didn't take, or it wasn't a bank really, it was a credit union, but they didn't take care of it in a timely fashion. So,
Mm.
the trusts are a great instrument, but they don't necessarily, as you observe, they don't necessarily always work the way
Sure.
you think they will. So, yeah.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, and another thing that I, I I suspect you and your listeners would be interested in. Um, I have a theory, and I would love to do a study sometime um, about this. But what I've noticed is that there's almost no relationship between whether uh, whether a case ends up in probate litigation and whether there's a will or a trust. Uh,
Hmm.
so, yeah, almost no relationship. You can have perfect documents where, and even by perfect, like I can go to an extreme where a married couple maybe did their estate plan 20 years ago, and then they redid it 15 years ago, and then they redid it 10 years ago, and each version basically says the same thing.
Mhm.
But if there's uh, if there's dissension in the family or mistrust or lack of transparency, um, that could easily end up in litigation, and I've seen that. And sometimes it can be triggered. Oh shoot, I had a well, I have a case right now where unfortunately there's litigation, and I think one of the sparks that triggered it is the trustee called my client, who's a beneficiary, a racial slur.
Oh gosh.
and so I'm actually trying to reach out and see if we can just have like a half-hour meeting and kind of work through things a little bit
Right.
instead of spending the next 2 years in court and spending all the money. But and then the other thing is, and I'm not sure if maybe we're getting a little dark here, but um, in terms of when there's litigation or when there's conflict in the family,
Hmm.
there's almost always some uh, uh, some addiction of some kind, or some kind of childhood abuse. Like I can't think of a case where there was litigation where there I can't. Okay, I'm losing touch with my grammar here. So I can't think of a case that involved really bad litigation where there was no one, no one was an addict. Everyone was fully functioning,
Hmm.
psychologically healthy, that kind of a thing. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and so it frankly, from that standpoint, um, estate planning really, it really involves communication in the family, and I mean, so what the other thing is, um, like okay, I was saying, what ends up in litigation. The other thing is, if you have a family that's really, I'm going to say spiritual and not religious,
Okay. Hmm.
because the religious families often, I've noticed, often end up in litigation, or they can, because, because there's a difference between being, I think, spiritual and being religious. And I'm sorry, I'm getting into my own philosophy here and everything, but
Yeah. No. No. No.
the families that have a good solid background, I guess that's what I'm saying, have a much easier job of just transferring things, and whatever, you could, whatever it is, if it's a house or a bank account or whatever, it means something to, to the next generation. And
Hmm.
so for that to actually have meaning and to stick and to to benefit the next generation, it just requires more. It requires more than some documents. So, and yeah, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm sorry, I probably hijacked the conversation because we were supposed to talk
Oh,
about probate myths, but
yeah. No. No. So this is actually quite fascinating. So, um, when you, I mean, I'm trying to formulate my thought here. So, you know, I mean, I've seen something similar. All the documents in the world cannot bridge a a gap created by um, two people who have a different values system or who value different things, right? And it seems to me that
you
perhaps there's something coming into play there.
oh, you hit the magic word there, values. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so, and that's tricky. I mean, I think this is way easier for most of the history of humanity, having common values.
Hmm.
I mean, shoot, majority of those were set by the church or the synagogue, or whatever people went to, and
Right.
so the parents didn't have to really think about it. But
Hmm.
here we're up against TikTok and Instagram, and you know uh, church synagogue attendance is down and all of this, so it's just more challenging for sure. I'm dealing
Hmm.
with it in my own family. um so it, and I've just seen it, so it is definitely tricky, but I'll say that there are some shortcuts. And maybe we should get on another podcast, because I know the title of this podcast is about probate myths, but just you're going to have one title on the podcast, and then we'll be talking about.
Well, that's okay. I can change it when it posts on YouTube. I can change the title. So
okay, all right. But well, certainly, what I would say is to anyone who really cares about the what kind of a legacy they want to leave for their kids. For one, make sure they have family stories, like stories about the predecessors. And that's really important, much more important than a box of photographs, with no context. So like just some little shortcuts to kind of help pass on your legacy in a more meaningful way. Spend a little time, and instead of using all the photographs from the box, like pick 20 of them and put them into some kind of a scrapbook, or you don't have to get all artsy or whatever, but and then write like, this is my here. So I'll tell from my own personal past. Okay, so this is my grandpa who came over from Germany in 1928, and he didn't speak English, and he learned the language by reading the Sunday newspaper, the cartoons, and that kind of thing. And this is what he did. And, that just so there's some kind of a history there. And I've seen that the families that have that, those are really cherished. And what else? So certainly, certainly stories. And then what if you're dealing with significant wealth, what it means, what was involved in getting it, and what your hope as the parent, what your hopes for the future are, because that provides I guess a path, I guess, for the future. And it just statistically, there's been studies about this that makes it much more likely that the next generation is going to appreciate that and treat it more with respect, as opposed to squandering it, or making bad decisions, that kind of a thing. So anyway, so should we get back on track with the probate myths, and then we can get on another call if you want to?
Yeah, sure. So you covered two of the myths.
Yeah.
And
yeah, let's see here. Well, oh shoot, I had a case recently where there was a will that set forth a whole, like, it went into a whole lot of detail, that this account goes to this person, and this account goes to this person, and this life insurance should be used for like a certain amount of it should be set aside and used to take care of my dog, and and so on and so on. Well, most of those accounts were joint or had pay on death beneficiaries, and the life insurance had a beneficiary.
Right.
So the whole will, and I mean, unfortunately, it was heartbreaking for the family and confusing for the family. And yes, there was years of litigation over this, because it actually turned out that it turned out that other people ended up getting everything, and not the family members. And so and the person who ended up getting the dog didn't get any money to care for the dog. It ended up going to someone else, and all of this stuff. So so that myth is that just because something's named in the will or named in the trust, that's exactly who gets it, because it like a joint tenancy, if there's a beneficiary designation that can what's the word, contradict that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or reverse it.
Yeah. Wow.
Let's see. There's the instant authority fallacy. And that's the idea that if I'm named in the will, then I can start listing the house for sale and
Oh,
distributing things and doing everything.
right.
And that's not true. You have to be, and I think in California there you talk about administrator, right? I think it's administrator or executor. Here in Arizona we talk about personal representative, but so the person involved or the person in charge has to actually be officially appointed by the court system. So yeah.
Right.
And
And
then
same here. And it's not necessarily a quick process.
right, yeah, it's a little longer in California. Yeah. And then, well, the other thing is that so the myth is that if you have a living trust, that that you don't need a probate, and everything's going to go smoothly. Well,
Mhm.
that may or may not be true, and we kind of talked about this before. That if you have, if you have a trust, maybe it wasn't funded, or there might be interpretation issues in it. Um, so. Uh, yeah, it's actually really important to get an attorney to help. It's really important. So I'll give you a quote from the probate commissioner from the hearing that I was on that caused me to be late for this call.
Okay.
She said, quote, probate is complicated, and she was actually advising other heirs that were contesting something that contesting a petition that we had filed,
Hmm.
and encouraging them to get an attorney because um, because there's all kinds of different things involved, and you have to just you have to interpret the trust, and it says that there might be subtrusts and all kinds of other things. So anyway, just because you have a trust doesn't mean that everything's going to be smooth sailing necessarily.
Right.
So
Right.
there, we got back on track. Good for us.
We did. Yeah. Interest. I'm dealing with a matter right now where the decedent engaged in estate planning for several years died intestate. You
Oh,
know?
really? Oh,
It was he'd been working with the estate planning attorney, I think, for 2 or 3 years. The documents were done, all this
just
stuff,
never signed them.
but he never
Oh,
signed
wow.
them, never funded the trust,
Mm,
and worse, never made provision for estate taxes. I think
mm,
people think that, oh, it's because the lifetime exemption is so high, I don't have to worry about estate taxes. But this estate is just being walloped by
mm,
estate taxes because no provision was made. There was no life insurance or anything to handle that. And look, the heir,
yeah.
he's won the lottery on a certain level.
Hmm.
um and I think it's still not quite reconciled to what's happened to him, right? But from the standpoint of those of us who are helping him with this, and who do this professionally, we look at this, we say it's such a waste.
Yeah.
We're talking about a nine. We're talking about an 8-figure, estate tax,
Yeah.
burden. So it's just really, really a
So
shame.
something like that happened to me actually. I had well, my father passed away, and long story short, I didn't really have a relationship with him, and so I did not have the the meaning background, or the shared values background that we were talking about before, and
Mhm.
so for me it was just some money, and well, and there were a couple of things that at play for me. One was that um, I'd only just met him, and I actually really wanted to have a relationship with him, and then he passed away, and so for me the money was kind of like a consolation prize that
Mhm.
I didn't like. It wasn't really what I wanted. Um,
Yeah.
that plus the estate taxes kind of got me into uh, kind of a financial nihilism, I guess. I didn't see the purpose of it. I ended up taking more risks than I should have because like, I saw these big numbers coming and going, and huge amount in my TD Ameritrade account, and then half of it went to the federal government, and and that just kind of got me in a well, plus no background of what the meaning to it should have been,
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing who to talk to, and then unfortunately there is a whole industry of people who somehow find people like me, or find people like the person you're talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
have great ideas for investments for them. So I got into that circle, uh, and yeah. So anyway, well, I hope the person you're talking about can just find some meaning with it and find some peace, prior to making bad decisions.
Yeah, I mean, so fortunately, I think he's a very grounded person, just
Great.
in general, and we've sort of built a team for him, that to help him understand what does all this mean, what does it mean to be a good steward of,
Oh, that's
you know,
wonderful.
what he's,
Good.
what he's acquiring or inheriting, and so and this is so this is not really a myth. I think this is sort of the crux of it is, we look at probate as so much of a financial um matter, I guess is the best word I can come up with. But one of the things that I've stressed in many of the shows that I've done is it's as much a relationship um, issue as it is a financial issue. So whether you're choosing a trustee or an executor or a personal representative, or you're figuring out your beneficiaries, or all this is all about the relationships among all these people. And in order for an estate plan to work relatively along the lines of what's intended, the relationships have to be relatively straightened out. And I what I'm
Yeah.
hearing from you is when they're not, that's when like you said, no amount of paperwork will overcome these relationships not being straightened out. And yet that's the real hard part. We can draw up all kinds of fancy documents, but can we really straighten out problems that may have festered for years, if not decades.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree. I had a wonderful experience with a local family here in Arizona.
Hmm.
Um, uh, they're Mormon, uh, and I say that because I think it's partly relevant. Um,
Hmm.
they had a strong, um, they, they had shared values.
Hmm.
To go back to the word you were using before, and uh, I was involved in helping facilitate some family meetings that helped bridge some gaps that they were experiencing, and there was a rift in the family, and it was a wonderful thing. Just they're moving forward in a well they're moving forward together as a family, and uh, uh, so for example, um, I was I was at the family meeting where they had the grandchildren all together for the first time in maybe 5 years or something like that, and it
Wow.
was really good. And so, doing something like that's the kind of foundation that's going to lead more likely to success. In terms of the
Right.
future, just probate or no probate.
Right,
So
right, right, and absolutely. And as we had a long meeting with this fellow that I mentioned a few minutes ago. We had a long meeting with him yesterday, and in the end, what I continually stressed was this is about understanding what kind of life you want for you and your family, what your goals are, and then how can this inheritance help you achieve that? That's fundamental. It's not about the numbers per se,
mhm.
right? Because the numbers can be smaller, they can be larger, whatever, but it's about it's about one's life, right? And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. You know,
Well, and if I could interject, um,
please.
the the real sensitive area is the grandchildren. So,
Mm,
so here's what I mean by that. Okay, so just let this play out a little bit. Okay, well, okay, so there was a parent, I guess, that accumulated some money and now is passing it to the child. Okay, um, what I see play out too often is, now this generation is going to have a nice life and they're going to go on nice vacations and go to private schools and wear
mhm,
nice clothes and that kind of thing, have that kind of expectation, um, and what can easily happen is uh, just letting off the gas pedal in terms of work ethic, and then not teaching the next generation how to have the fire in the belly. And that's, oof, that is, I honestly don't have the answer to that. I wish I did. I wish I could pass it on, but how, that's going to be the challenge. How do you convey that to the next generation, to have the fire in the belly? Because here's what happens, and I've seen this on, this is the saddest thing that I see as a probate lawyer. It The saddest thing is not that people sue each other in court or whatever. The saddest thing for me is at some point that there's a generation that's brought up with nice vacations and nice cars and all that kind of stuff, and they don't have a work ethic, and the money runs out. Oof,
mhm.
that's really tough. Now, I mean, now, at some point, maybe it's the grandchildren or something. You've set them up for a really hard life. So
Yep.
that's the difficult thing. And I don't know. You do the best you can with passing on stories and what it meant, and try, like, don't don't give the kids everything they want. They have to work for it. If they don't have a job at a certain age, you kick them out, and they have to figure it out, even if they're sleeping on someone's sofa or something. Like, you have to be the hard parent. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah. People mistake being kind with being nice, and kindness isn't always nice. Sometimes the
right,
kindest thing is to be a little bit on, is to be tough, so
yeah,
that people learn what it really means to take a hold of their life. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I've seen the same thing among friends where there's generational wealth, and um, sometimes one sibling will be a hard worker and the other two, they just live dissipating lives, and you kind of wonder,
yeah,
well, how come this one figured it out and these two didn't?
right, right,
it,
right,
it's right, it's a mystery. um but somehow that's what happens. So
right.
well, gosh, we've had a really great discussion here. I would continue for a while longer,
Yeah,
but we do have to end things here. But Paul, thank you so much for your perseverance in working
yeah.
out the
Well,
technical problems, and
thank
coming
you,
on
thank
the
you
show.
for being gracious and letting me come on late. And I'd love to meet you sometime. You sound like a wonderful guy.
Well, thank you. You as well. So I'm gonna sort of
Good.
wrap up the show here for a minute, but
Yep.
if you'll kind
Sounds
of
good.
hang tight, we can talk for a minute or so offline.
Yep.
Um, so folks, that is the show for today. So you got kind of a double show, because you did get the 5 myths of probate debunked, but you also got a lot of other very deep but important ideas about what probate is about, and what the transfer of generational wealth is about. So I don't usually do this, but I would encourage you to watch this episode a second time and listen to some of the thoughts that Paul has shared, and how those, reflect on how those might impact how you are looking at your own estate plan, and how you are working with your clients. Because I will tell you straight out, I'm working with one particular client, something, and I was debating last night trying to fall asleep whether I should address something to this particular client, and having reflected on it as I've listened to Paul, I think I'm going to, and hopefully the client won't say, hey, you're out of line. So sometimes I think we have to be willing to really, as we say in Yiddish, tachlis, get really down to the nitty gritty of these issues to really serve our clients well. So thank you so much for joining us today.